started making names right away. And I loved it. I was robbing drug dealers and taking their gold right off their neck. And the shit we did, who's going to call the police on you? A drug dealer?
I can identify with anything that was normal, to be honest with you. But I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah.
99% of the time, you're going to disagree.
Just like the Donnie Brasco situation with Lefty?
Yeah, because the reason why, they figure it this way. You brought this guy around, he ratted on everybody, now he ratted on you. You might turn around and join him and rat on us, so we get rid of you, there's no connection between there and there, and they get rid of you.
Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Dave Iacovetti Jr. What's up, Dave?
How are you, Bill?
How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
No problem, man. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time for me. A lot of people are anticipating this interview. So where do you want to start, man? There's so much to get into.
Well, it's funny. My dad, as they know, everyone knows, is from Brooklyn. My mom's from Georgia, and I was born in Baltimore on the Mason-Dixon line. And that's where my parents had met. Ironically, she was pregnant with me in New York, but then she didn't want me born in New York, so she went to Baltimore, and that's where I was born. And that was 1964, so that's the beginning.
When's the first time you met your father?
The first time I remember actually meeting him was, I guess, 1969, 1970. My father was in with Papa Doc Duvalier, and he was running boats of, they called them junkets with gamblers to Haiti. And we had just got to Miami, and the power, a storm had come through and knocked out the power. And I had to see him by candlelight. It was my birthday, and I'm pretty sure it was my 6th birthday or 5th birthday. And I had to see him by candlelight. And then after that, I didn't get to see my father again until I was 14. I talked to him on the phone, but he was in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary during that time. So I had to kind of grow up without him. My mother was mom and dad. And my big thing with knowing about my father was either from what my grandfather would tell me about him, or my uncles would tell me about him, or going to the library and reading about him in books. And that's what I found was pretty amazing, that my dad, we had the same name, is in all these books at the library with all these famous people, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., you name them, my dad knew them.
When your father was away, were you going and visiting him in the penitentiaries and stuff?
My mother tried to take us once to visit him in Atlanta, and I wrote about it in my book. I wrote a book about him a couple of years ago. It went to #1 in Amazon's organized crime biographies. And I talked about it in the book, where they wouldn't let her in. So my mom, never being one to take no for an answer, got on the phone and got the warden on the phone from a payphone. And how it happened, I don't know, but the warden brought my father to the phone, and I got to talk to him on the telephone. And I remember that like yesterday. And we ended that conversation is that he would be getting out soon, and to take care of my mom and little sister until he did. And then I didn't see him again until I was 14, and as he was coming out of the penitentiary, they were putting me behind bars. Literally, the same time frame he got out of the penitentiary, I went in at 14.
You were a crime boss as a kid. You were trying to be one, right?
I was trying to be. I was for a minute.
So you want to explain what the whole situation? Yeah, you want to explain what happened with the?
Sure. I had been so enthralled with the stories of my father and his cronies and how they would do the things that they would do, that I started emulating them as a teenager. And there was a guy, he was called Larry the Garbage Man. My mom was a waitress at a it's called the Royal Hungarian kosher restaurant on Miami Beach. It was a famous little spot. And while she's at work, me and my sister would hang out on Washington Avenue, which is the main drag of Miami Beach, like a mini New York, if you will, down there. They got the delicatessens, the fruit stands, the pizza parlors. So I grew up there, but, I got involved with crime. And Larry, the garbage man, would bring me credit card receipts. I'd give him $1 for every one. And back then, they didn't check authorizations and stuff. So I had 100 different credit card numbers. I was ordering everything from parakeets to Atari games. I was the first kid on my block with an Atari game.
Over the phone, right? You're ordering them over the phone, yeah.
Yeah, I could change my voice. I could sound like an old man. I could sound like a Cuban refugee. I always had that acting bug in me, and I was using it for all the wrong reasons. But yeah, I mean, it was fun for a minute.
I mean, for you to pull that off as a 14-year-old kid, man, that's insane.
Yeah, it was going great. I mean, I took down a lot of money. I had my own treasure chest full of diamonds and Mexican 50 pesos gold coins I had ordered. I mean, I'd go to my P.O. box and there'd be an ounce of gold almost every day that I had ordered from this one or ordered from that one. Canine attack dog, I ordered one of those. He was my best friend for 12 years. He's in that picture that you have of me and him there. But then I branched out and I started impersonating an IRS agent and collecting back taxes from people that didn't owe them. And that's never good.
How did you pull that off, being 14 and having to see these people?
Yeah, so I could change my voice, like I said, so these people would think they're talking to an IRS office. And then I would tell them, to save them the trouble of coming to the office, we would send Johnny Mason out, the office boy. And he'd meet him at their bank, and they could just pay him there, and he'd give them a receipt, and off they went. I'd walk them to the taxis. No one was ever hurt. Anything I ever did criminal-wise was, I don't want to say victimless, but no one was physically harmed. Their wallets got harmed maybe, but they weren't physically harmed. So that went on for a good while.
Here's a picture of the dog.
Yeah, Savior was his name. He saved my butt a bunch of times. I taught him in German how to, attack, stop, etc. He was literally my best friend, that dog. But anyway, so after a while of doing this, people were catching on, and they put together a task force. They flew in Secret Service guys from New York, IRS agents from Atlanta, Metro-Dade, Miami Police Department with Miami Beach, and they had a task force looking for this ring of people that were taking money as, pretending to be the IRS. And eventually they caught me. They caught me, and I confessed to everything. But they were very surprised, to say the least, that someone that young, especially in the 70s, this was 1978, would pull something like that off. And my father, who had absolutely nothing to do with it, he had just got home, God bless him. He told me years later, he goes, son, if I had been driving down the street and seen you walking along and innocently said, get in the car, let me give you a ride home, because they would have never believed that I wasn't part of that. You make me nervous, son.
He would have went right back. He would have went right back.
Yeah.
Been no questions.
Yeah. So I got in trouble, and then I had to go into a program. The state attorney at the time was Janet Reno. Later, she would become the head of the Justice Department under Bill Clinton. The reporter that reported on my case was a Pulitzer Prize winning true crime reporter. She went on to win a Pulitzer. I've always had a bit of a psychicness about me, and that day I just knew something wasn't right. First of all, the lady, she wanted to meet at a different bank because, in my little word game, I would find out where their bank was, if their husband was still alive, blah, 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 whatever it was. And I thought it was odd that she wanted me to meet her at a bank that I knew wasn't hers, you know. So I already knew that was. And I remember looking down, and below my feet there was a trail of ants, and they were walking between my feet while I was waiting for her to show up. And there was a lizard there, and he was just frozen, and he didn't move. But every couple of ants, he'd swoop down and eat one of them, and then he'd pop back up and just sit there. And then, you know, and I go, man, this just ain't right, man. Something about that just freaked me out. So I get up, and I was actually going to leave and just forget about the money, because they were like anywhere from $2 to $5 grand in cash each time that I did it. And there she was. And she just handed me an envelope. She didn't count it out like most of the other people. When the office boy would meet them, they would count out the money. I had a toy typewriter that belonged to my sister. I'd type out a receipt from the IRS. I mean, it was totally, you know, they laughed about it later, the cops, but they weren't laughing up to that point. So I knew something was wrong, and I was leaving, and I had a briefcase, and I put the envelope in my briefcase, and she started looking all around, and I was like, oh, hell no. You know, I just started walking down Washington Avenue. I got to 11th Street. I made a right, and I looked over my shoulder, and back then detectives all drove LeBarons. They had handlebar mustaches, most of them, you know, and theirs, sure enough, looked like Tom Selleck, man, in a LeBaron, and he was on a mic. Back then they had like the radios in the car, and he was talking on the mic. So I cut down a couple of buildings, and there was a little alley between them, and I could see at the end of the alley was a taxi cab. And I said, geez, I'll throw that guy $100. I'll be out of here. Let me make it to that taxi cab. I never made it to the taxi cab.
No, they got you.
I came out between those two buildings, and there he was, man. He had to be, to me, he looked like he was 10 feet tall, and he had a 45 automatic chrome 45, and he stuck it right between my eyes, and he goes, hit the ground. And man, I hit that ground, and as I did, there was guys coming with shotguns down the alley. A helicopter was flying over. Cars were screeching to halt all around me. I mean, it was a movie scene. And they go, get the cab driver, get the fucking cab driver, and they yanked this guy right through the driver's side window and fling him up against the hood, and they're getting ready to stuff him. And he reaches under his shirt and pulls out a badge. I'm a cop. I'm a cop.
Yeah. They probably thought he was involved with you.
And they thought he was my getaway guy. So I wouldn't have made it far if I had got to the taxi cab. Man. But at that point, they got all these guns on me. And I guess the head guy looked down. He said, how old are you? And I went, 14. And he goes, oh, gee, get the cuffs off him. And they took the cuffs off me and, you know, gave me some water. And, you know, they were all like nice to me. Who put you up to this, kid? And when they found out no one had put me up to it, they were really, really upset.
They probably felt like idiots, you know. They probably felt like total idiots, man.